Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Historic Fischer Theatre for Danville's very first That's What She Said. Please welcome your host for tonight's show, Ms. Amanda Crose.
Hello, Danville. Woo! Dang, look at you. No, really. I need us all to take this moment in. Look around. Just be still in this moment. This is huge. Though, luckily for those of us gracing this beautiful stage tonight, we can't really see you. It's good news for us. Whew. We can hear you, though, so I encourage you to respectfully show your love and support throughout our show tonight. Let's give it a try. Yeah. Just like that. My name is Amanda Crose. I'm the regional producing partner for That's What She Said Danville, and tonight I'll be your MC. Over the last couple of months, I've gotten questions like, what's that she said thing? You're doing what at the Fisher? You mean that joke from The Office, right? Yeah. But my closest friends and family aren't surprised one bit that I decided to add producer to my long list of titles. You see, I'm a classic overachiever. Yeah, thank you. I don't know how long I've been like this, but I recall confidently telling a friend at 18 that I was going to make the world a better place. Of course, at 18, it came off way cockier than that. I honestly blame my grandma Crose for my achievement drive. I spent a lot of time with her growing up. When I was bored or in trouble, she'd just magically appear to pick me up. Little did my parents know I had secretly snuck off to make these arrangements. I think I may have somehow even faked mono in the 3rd grade just to spend more time with her. She was my #1 fan. She led me to believe I could do anything I set my mind to. My grandma would constantly encourage me as I put on fashion shows in her living room. I'd wear her slips as dresses and walk around in her bright red high heels while singing Roy Orbison's Pretty Woman. She would tell the other grandmas in the pretend audience how beautiful and special I was and how proud she was of me. This is all starting to make sense now, isn't it? But as an adult, I've made a life out of chasing achievements. Degrees, titles, cramming a 30-year career in education into a decade seemed like a good idea. My Midwest work ethic has made it all so easy. I thrive on hard work and getting shit done. So when completing my bachelor's degree, my husband began ever so lovingly to suggest that I get a hobby. This never really interested me much, though. Work has always been my hobby, specifically work worth doing. A few years ago, on a trip, while returning from a trip with a friend, it was suggested that maybe soap making could be my hobby. I loved buying locally made soap as a souvenir when we traveled, so why not give it a try? In that short, 3-hour drive home from the beach, I had turned this suggested hobby into a business. Name, logo, mission statement, farmer's market research. I had it all figured out. Shortly after starting that new hobby, like mid-first batch, it very quickly became Amanda's Hobby by Josh. I just don't know how to hobby, but my husband does my hobby really well. Thanks, babe. My brain doesn't turn off. I see possibilities everywhere. Don't even get me started on my ideas for revitalizing the Village Mall. I am never satisfied with the status quo, and I have this unwavering belief that I can do anything I put my mind to, and that you can too. I am so grateful to have women in my life who have believed in me and showed me that it was okay to believe in myself too. Because of them, I know that believing in yourself is a woman's greatest superpower. And I think, just maybe, I found a hobby that will stick, encouraging and supporting women to believe in themselves and to share their stories. Welcome to my new hobby. It is with my deepest gratitude that I present to you the most incredible women, the cast of That's What She Said, Danville.
Yeah, cheat, that could be a fantasy. I could tell you got big energy. It ain't too many of them that can handle me, but I might let you try it out the Hennessy. Make them sing to this thing like a melody. And if your girl ain't right, I got the remedy. It ain't too many of them that can handle me. Yeah, cheat, that could be a fantasy.
I think it was around the age 8 years old that I first started to think that there was something wrong with my body. I remember swimming in my backyard, and my brother's best friend lived behind us, and he would open the sliding glass door and make whale noises at me. I remember being in junior high, being fed Slim Fast with no conversation of healthy choices for my body. Become sophomore year, I became a rape survivor. If you've ever experienced sexual assault, you know how much it can destroy you. And it felt like the only thing with value was my body. I told one person that something had happened, and I thought it was being taken care of in a way that teenagers do. And then that person believed them over me and initiated beating me until I couldn't move and brought my rapist to watch. From that moment, I didn't tell a soul until I got older. It was just another event in my life that I allowed to dictate my worth. Going into my senior year in high school, I was sick a lot. I'd lost a lot of weight. And I remember it being prom night. I was doing my makeup in my parents' bedroom. My mom came in and she was like, "Your dad wanted me to tell you that you look beautiful tonight." And we weren't a family that spoke like that. I knew my parents loved me, but we didn't say things like that. So I internalized that as only being worthy of being told I was beautiful because I'd lost weight. When I moved to Chicago, it gave me the ultimate sense of freedom. I got to tattoo, pierce, dress how I wanted. I got to discover who I was. But unfortunately, with that came a lot of unhealthy decisions for my body and my mind. Freedom without boundaries is destructive. So by the time I graduated and moved home, I was met with a lot of conversation that I would never get a good job, never get a good man looking the way that I did. So it became my personal mission to prove people wrong, but not out of strength, out of bitterness, which eventually led to even more unhealthy decisions for my body and my mind. I always say this body was built by Portillo's and bitterness. Thank you. Thank you. In my 20s, I entered a toxic relationship that always made me feel like another woman was better than me, but also toxic because I didn't love myself enough to set any boundaries. In 2012, the next big event happened. I gave birth to twins with a rare condition who passed away within 27 hours of birth. It felt like even my body was telling me my body isn't good enough. Everything in my life was validating all of those negative thoughts in my head about my body. And instead of pushing back against that, I chose to believe it and allow it to dictate who I was. I knew deep down inside who I was and who I was meant to be, but it was like the world was fighting against me, trying to put me in this box of a fat girl who isn't worthy of good things in life. I can remember having conversations with people. They'd look at my face, then look at my stomach, then back at my face. They didn't have to say anything. I assumed I knew exactly what they were thinking. So when I started doing photography in my studio, it became my personal mission to make sure that no woman ever felt how I felt about myself every single day. I was not in a good place in my home life, and that toxicity almost destroyed me. I remember hitting rock bottom August 21st, 2018. I told someone in my life that I had hit rock bottom and that I wanted to die. The response to that was, "I hate you." And in that moment, instead of thinking, wow, this person doesn't deserve to be in my life, all those years of allowing other people's opinions to dictate who I was led me to think, wow, how lucky am I that someone can despise me so much and still choose to stay. That led me down a very dark path. At that point, I was ready to die. In my mind, I was obviously a burden to those around me and not worthy of the things that I thought I deserved. And it wasn't until one day in my studio, I had a client come in. And after her appointment, she texted me, and she said, "You aren't okay. What's wrong?" And that was the first time that I thought, like, someone saw me. They saw everything that I thought I was hiding so well. And it was through that new friendship that I chose to fight. It was in that moment that I chose me. It took me a couple years in a divorce to really force me to see myself for who I really was. I am worthy of love and happiness. I am worthy of good things. And I have been worthy of these things this whole time. And so I let it continue to be my mission at my studio that no woman ever feels how I felt about myself, including my 9-year-old daughter. Then life changed again, and someone entered my daughter's life that started to undo all the self-love and body positivity that I had infused in her since childhood. And I realized that this fight never ends. I have to be vigilant. I have to be self-aware to make sure that she is ahead of where I was at her age. It is my job to make sure that she understands having a beautiful face doesn't mean a thing if you don't have a beautiful soul. It is my job to make sure that she understands you don't judge people for their bodies. So I make sure to have the uncomfortable conversations. Because we might think that 9 years old is too young to have conversations like that, but I can promise you I started those conversations as soon as she was able to speak. It will be ingrained in her that your soul is what matters and how you treat other people is what matters. Have the uncomfortable conversations. Just do it. And so between my mission in the studio with women who come in to celebrate their bodies and the job I have as a mother to a 9-year-old girl, I will never stop choosing to help people love themselves. I encourage everyone to give random compliments. If you see something you like about someone, you tell them. If someone does something kind, acknowledge it. Let your kids witness that. The world tells us every day what we shouldn't be, but we get to decide who we are, and I recommend you choose wisely. And remember the neighbor boy who made whale noises at me? Well, he friend requested me about a month and a half ago. Thanks, but no thanks, I'm good.
When I ask people what characteristics describe me, I tend to hear things like resilient, confident, persistent, brave, kind-hearted, determined, passionate, and loyal. But those who truly know me, like know me better than I know myself know me, they know a side that most people don't get to see. Y'all, I am the silliest person that you may ever meet. I am crazy, clumsy, goofy, nonstop laughing machine, and there is never a dull moment with me. Or is there? To most, I'm considered to be the strong friend. You know, the friend that clearly has it all together because she's always been known as the mature one. Or the friend who is expected to always have a smile on her face. And the moment she doesn't, she's told she's being ungrateful, hateful, and unappreciative. We can't forget the friend who was expected to show up to any and everybody's anything, despite the 1,000,001 things that's already placed on the schedule. How dare I cancel and tell someone I can't make it? Because then I'm known as the unsupportive friend and the friend who only cares about herself. The strong friend can't possibly be overwhelmed because that friend is told things like, oh, you got it. You were made for this. And these things may be true, but what about me? I deserve a break too. Sometimes my tears are masked by laughter in order to keep myself going. I grieve differently. I handle trauma differently. But I'm expected to consistently move at a pace that serves others, all while neglecting myself. The strong friend. On August 12th at around 11:50 p.m., I experienced something that I never thought that I would experience. Not Tierra, the 2009 prom queen. Not Tierra, the college graduate. Not Tierra, the community advocate. Yes, Tierra Brown, shot by a stray bullet while being an innocent bystander, enjoying a night out with her friends. There I was, at one point, laughing and joking as I walked to my car, and literally in a matter of seconds, in a blink of an eye, my life flashed before my eyes. At first, I thought I heard fireworks. Then the sounds grew louder and closer, then instantly there was a voice in my head that was so clear and precise, yelling, telling me to get down. It was so clear as if my friends were all yelling directly in my ear, telling me. I hit the ground, frantic, nervous, and in disbelief. I couldn't believe this was actually happening to me. These things aren't supposed to happen to people like me. But I would soon realize the saying that was once told to me as a child, bullets don't have eyes, would soon become my reality. As I hit the rocky ground, I felt a sharp piercing to my chest as if I landed on a rock. Girl, get off that ground, one friend stated to me as she laughed and thought I was being my dramatic self. With a monotone voice, I said quietly, I think I was shot. Not hearing a word that came out my mouth, my friend said, girl, you were laid out, as a burst of laughter consumed her voice. As soon as I began to get up, I had the urge to grab my chest. I think I was shot, I said again with a little more assertiveness in my voice, as I took my hand away from the pain and watched the blood spread across my white t-shirt. Instantly, my friends went into panic mode, screaming and trying to figure out what our next move was going to be. I stood there, stuck in time as if I was in the Matrix. I could hear the commotion around me, but I couldn't move. All I could do was stare down at my chest, trying to comprehend what just happened to me. Get in the car, where are your keys, who's driving her to the hospital, were all questions and conversations that needed my attention, but I couldn't focus on them. I was focused on an episode of Grey's Anatomy. You know, the one where there was a gunman loose in the hospital. I remember hearing them say to apply pressure to the wound and don't panic, because the more you panic, the faster the blood will rush out. Who knew my obsession with Grey's Anatomy would save my life? Here I am, thinking I'm Meredith Grey with a gunshot wound to the chest and moving slower than a sloth on Madagascar. I did everything except get in the car so they could take me to the hospital. I picked my bucket hat off the ground and threw it in the back seat. Couldn't forget that. I threw a cup off the roof of my car. Who knows what my why was for that? And then I called my mom. Calm, cool, and collected. Mom, I was just shot. And then I passed the phone over to my friend who was driving my vehicle. Looking back, maybe that wasn't the best way to inform her, but I wanted her to hear it from me and know that I was okay. The entire ride to the hospital, I prayed, this couldn't be my time to go. This couldn't be how I left this earth. I looked up to God and said, Lord, I have so much more work to do. This can't be my time to go. After 4 hours, around 4:30 a.m., as I was wheeled out into the lobby where my family and close friends were patiently awaiting my arrival, I recognized that they were all there in support of me, the strong friend. I realized in that moment, I am so much more than a crazy, clumsy, goofy, nonstop laughing machine. I am resilient, confident, persistent, brave, kind-hearted, determined, passionate, and loyal. I am the strong friend.
Hola, Danville. I was the only girl my age from my village that went past 6th grade. Dirt mud, gravel road, no phone, no electricity, no running water in the house. A typical day when I was a middle school student in rural Panama. I woke up at 5 in the morning, gathered some firewood to make a small fire so I could cook breakfast for my dad and I. Coffee and fried plantains were most breakfasts. Sometimes an egg was cooked. After breakfast, I would bathe with water from a 5-gallon bucket that was drawn from a well. My book bag was always packed the night before while there was light. For each subject, I carry a notebook and a textbook. During rainy season, I carry an extra set of school uniform. I took a quarter every day in order to buy the snack at school. At 5:50 a.m. in the morning, I got on my bicycle and I rode 1 hour and 20 minutes one way. Thank you. You hear right, 1 hour and 20 minutes one way. You can see my legs. I rode through an isolated area of rice field at the beginning of the trip. On that part of the trip, as the only student, I would share a dirt mud road with many laborers headed to the commercial banana plantation. The isolated area was a little risky for a young girl. So I learned how to be street smart to keep safe from strangers. Then while I would ride in the shade of the banana plantation on a gravel road through the rest of the way with other many students. I paid a lady who lived close to the school 50 cents per week to keep my bike safe while I was at school. This lady also allowed me to use her house to change from wet clothes into uniform if I gotten rain on. School started at 7:40 a.m. During the school day, I switched classroom at the sound of the bell noting the end of the period. The school was built in mason blocks with open bins, no glass window, and a tin roof. By 11 a.m., the roof will creak and pop from the tropical sun, heating up and expanding. Whew, I can feel it. Sometimes I would stay late school to use the library. At a time, I was so tired of traveling and other problems that I would tell my mom not to wake me up the next morning because I was going to quit. And my mom will pull out the F word. Faith. You have to have faith, Maria. If I wanted to continue past ninth grade in Panama, I might choose a path career between science, business, and agriculture. At first, I decided to study agriculture for two reasons. First, I wanted to wear pants and a skirt. Second, my brother predicted that the time that I will see I had to deal with a stubborn cow, I will quit. So I wasn't going to let them win. The agricultural school in Panama, a boarding school, with rustic student quarters. I went back home every other weekend. I was expected to pay $20 per tuition, but to good grades, mine was covered. Morning classes at the Ag Institute starting 7 to 11, including practical manual labor, removing brush, tending to the livestock, mending fences, etc. In the afternoon from 1 to 4, I was in classes learning about chemistry, history, geography, math. I learned to love agriculture, especially growing flowers and food, and I was good at it. Out of 55 students in my classroom, only 4 of us were girls. In 1990, my last year at the Ag Institute High School, I applied for a scholarship through Earth University, a brand new school in Costa Rica. The Kellogg Foundation provided me $8,600 per year, but the total yearly cost was $15,200. So I needed an additional $6,600 to attend, something that my parents will never be able to afford since my father's weekly salary was $50. So I went to the capital city to government private office that might provide the rest of the needed money through scholarship. And I was told that the scholarship money was allocated for that year to try next year. The capital city was 8 hours from my home, and I had only been there once previously. In December of that year, on the day of my high school graduation, I was surprised to be approached by the government, the Office of Agricultural Education, asked me what my future plans were. I mentioned I was not able to get all the needed scholarship money to go to Costa Rica, but I was the salutatorian, and I got a local scholarship that I could go to the university in my province. 4 days later, my sister in the capital city received a call from the government, the education office, with a message to have me phone them. Telephone in rural Panama were scarce, but radio station provided a message service. My sister phoned the radio station that my uncle listened, and the message went on air: Maria del Cid, phone Isi Torres at once. I remember clearly. It was hot, sunny afternoon when my uncle rode his bike to my house with the message. There were 2 public payphones I had access to. Both are about 35 minutes away by bicycle, but in an opposite direction. I headed for the one which was a little closer. To my surprise, the phone was out of order. The excitement and the possibility getting the rest of the scholarship money was overjoyed that I didn't mind having to ride 60 more minutes in the hot sun in the other direction to the phone that did work. Thank goodness. Isi Torres informed me that the Ag Education Office was able to fund the remainder of scholarship for Earth University. I instructed to get a passport and a documentation to study abroad. The full scholarship was the best Christmas present I ever received. If I didn't make the phone call, that money would have gone to another student. I went to this prestigious, one-of-a-kind new university in a full scholarship with most selected students from 16 different countries. I graduated from Earth University with a bachelor's in science and agriculture. My experience in education has opened many doors, and I'm improved my life quality every day. And I'm beyond grateful. I use my degree and knowledge to educate in sustainable horticulture practice. I volunteer around my community. I work with Peer Court, a social service agency. I also work passionately in gardening and beautification projects. I use my bilingual skill to translate and interpret it. In 2005, I was selected as one of the 20 outstanding women you should know of East Central Illinois. All this journey have helped me develop the skill and resources I need to thrive, be safe, be happy, and love. I have the opportunity to live in 4 different countries before making my home in Danville with my husband and my daughters. Muchísimas gracias, and God bless you.
Every great film has an even more amazing soundtrack. Do you ever wonder what your soundtrack would be if your life was a movie? I know I have. Soundtracks and scores have always captivated me, and anytime I'm listening to them, some of them become a part of me, a part of my soundtrack. Some are uplifting, some more dramatic, some provide a little comic relief. And some of my favorites reside in a minor key, which gives them a bit of an eerie or surreal feeling. And those are the ones that I feel deep, and they take me back to some of those pivotal moments in my life. Some that I'll be sharing with you tonight. The first soundtrack I ever loved was one we had when I was very little. It was, in fact, an 8-track. The Muppet movie soundtrack, circa 1979, was my favorite. And I loved all the songs on there, but there was one that always stood out. Gonzo's rendition of I'm Going to Go Back There Someday. A few of the lyrics. I've never been there, but I know the way. I'm going to go back there someday. Come and go with me. It's more fun to share. We'll both be completely at home in midair. I can remember sitting on my family room floor, listening to that music and feeling like I was flying and ready to hold on to my dreams. It was actually a song with a lot of deep meaning for a movie with a bunch of Muppets. Growing up with parents who were from North Dakota was always a segue to many stories and questions, and I could talk for hours and hours of the stories I had. And it was always worth the 15 to 18-hour drive, which was nonstop, especially when we transitioned to a van from a station wagon. Now, there were 3 of us kids, and I was always in the way back. And that was before seatbelt laws. When we go back to school, my friends and classmates would say where they spent their summers, Disney, the Grand Canyon, summer camps. I got to say, North Dakota, every year. Raised eyebrows usually followed, but honestly, they were the best 2 weeks of my summer. I actually drove for the first time on my grandparents' farm, because up there you can drive when you're 15. So my grandfather, my dad, and I drove to the pasture to go feed the cows. Now, while much of North Dakota is flat, there are also areas that have amazing hills and plunging valleys. And for a first-time driver, that was terrifying. As we climbed one of those hills, I could literally only see the sky, and my grandfather telling me to stop slowing down, and me hoping that there was a road on the other side. We successfully made it over the hill, and as we turned into the pasture, I could see the cows in the far distance. And sure enough, they knew the truck, they knew the sound of the truck, and they were now headed right for me. And in my head, I could hear my soundtrack in full blast of the ecstasy of gold from the good, the bad, and the ugly. And again, my grandfather telling me, stop slowing down. It's okay, they'll move. So I pressed on, trying not to close my eyes, praying I didn't hit a cow, and sure enough, they split like the Red Sea. Sometimes I think that might be a metaphor for my life, always cautiously heading straight in, with a voice in the back of my head telling me to never slow down. It's okay, they'll move. All in all, I've never really had a lot of problems with speaking in public. My family would often lose me at ball games because I'd wander off and I'd plop down next to a stranger and begin what I'm sure was an in-depth conversation of the meaning of life. Monty Python probably was onto something. To a parent, that can be a very scary trait for the kids to have. And as fate would have it, my daughter is the same. Her first word was hi. To be fair, she gets it honestly, as my husband is just as much of a talker as I am. Let's just say dinner conversations at the Rome household can last a while, but they're always amusing. But I wouldn't have it any other way. I officially met my husband when we came back from school to our hometowns. I say we met because of a mutual friend. He'll tell you we met at a bar. We were friends first, and after a night of talking until 3 a.m. in that same bar parking lot, we decided to become more. And it's like those movies about two people who are in the same place, brush past each other at a concert or a grocery store, but never really meet until finally the last scene. Because when we stopped and thought about it, our paths crossed many times over. And as much as I wished we had met earlier, I still believe we met at the perfect time. I won't dwell on our story too much, just that it's a beautiful storybook story. And in fact, our first dance at our wedding was from The Princess Bride, called Storybook Love. Speaking of our wedding, that was one for the storybooks as well. With most weddings, something always goes wrong. Sometimes it's small, sometimes it's big. I'd like to say the only thing that went wrong was the fact that we sent a message to the DJ to not play any country or any Kenny G at the reception. That message was lost because there was a lot of country and a lot of Kenny G. But no. Instead, there was a little mix-up with the readings that we had during the ceremony. We were given a book that had a number of readings in it to choose from. Some talked about two people becoming one, love is a virtue, and many other lovely readings. There was one that just didn't seem like it belonged because it talked about fornication, or rather how you should avoid it. Why would anybody choose that for their wedding? So we went with love is a virtue. Simple, sweet, perfect. So when the time comes for the reading, my husband and I are kneeling at the front of the church as my husband's godmother recites the reading. As she begins, we both looked at each other with eyes wide, and then to the priest as he lowered his head into his hands. As we all realized this wasn't the reading about love is a virtue. This was the reading about fornication. And I might add, it doesn't just say it once. It's like 7 times. I have no idea how she kept a straight face. It's definitely one of the most memorable parts of our wedding day. Kind of a small wonder that I actually wouldn't change for the world. Again, I might have to say Monty Python had a point to always look at the bright side of life. Now, while silence for me can be an indicator that something might be wrong, as I've gotten older, I've also found the beauty in it. It's amazing what you can truly hear when you are quiet. Quiet when I practice yoga, quiet when I run, and quiet when I go bird watching. Yes, I am a proud card-carrying Audubon Society bird nerd. It's something that a lot of people don't know about me. And luckily, I have the most amazing husband who will just smile and nod when I go on and on about the different birds that I saw during that day or some other little bird factoid. And my kids find the humor when I'm mid-sentence and I stop. That's a really cool bird. So you may see me out with my binoculars, my camera, my bird books and journals, sitting quietly, listening, and watching. This might be the part in my soundtrack where you could insert any song from a Disney princess movie with wildlife. Many of you may know, some may not, that I began my long career in public health over 20 years ago, most of it being in emergency preparedness. So I got y'all. This was my perfect niche because I've always been a planner. Lists, calendars, more lists, and first aid kits everywhere. I'm pretty sure I was even able to plan my pregnancies around work projects in summertime. And I love public health. But oddly enough, you can become an unpopular person to many if you're in public health. We're constantly reminding people of the problems a community faces so we can fix them. We're telling you to exercise, eat right, be safe, wear a condom, recycle, keep that restaurant clean, and always be prepared. But before immersing myself into emergency preparedness, I was a health educator. Prevention education, to be specific. Tobacco prevention, smoking cessation classes, and my favorite, STD prevention. It actually wasn't my favorite, but it offered a lot of comic relief in the early days of my career. Again, not being afraid to speak in public is really key. And oh, the phone calls I would get prior to my presentations. Are you providing how-tos? Are you bringing bananas? No. I've had a lot of nicknames throughout my life. Toad lovingly from my father, Peck from my sister and brother, Mel B from my college friends, and during the first 5 years of my career, the sex lady. When most of your stories around work revolve around that, it's not surprising. And I suppose I should have also seen it coming when my husband said I was in charge of the talk when our kids became that age. And so when I asked our daughter how our talk compared to the one she had at school, she glared and said, "Yours had a lot more detail." I suppose the only appropriate song during this part of my soundtrack would be The Birds and the Bees. I got very used to talking about unpopular and uncomfortable topics, but to be honest, I find most of the information fascinating. If you look at my bookshelves at home, you'll find books on the plague, pandemic history, patient zeros, statistics, smallpox, influenza, and I had most of those prior to the pandemic. Throw in a few Harry Potter books and some Shel Silverstein, and there you have it. Did I mention that I like music in a minor key? It's probably starting to make sense that this part of my soundtrack starts to sound like Jaws or Psycho. That might be why I didn't mind being one of the voices some of you heard during the pandemic. When people asked my husband what I did at the health department, he would usually add the caveat, if you know what my wife does, shit has hit the fan. Many of our lives have changed in the last few years, but I will tell you that my shoulders and my heart still bear the scars from our response to COVID. And the music during this part of my soundtrack began with sadness, moved to intensity, clarity, and finally, perseverance. Because even at the lowest of lows, I felt like where I was going was I was really able to excel and be the best of myself. Probably best described as one of my favorite songs called From Past to Present. And in a world of taboo topics, I get to say that I'm also 1 in 4. 1 in 4 pregnancies ends in a miscarriage. I'm kind of a stats person, so that's pregnancies, not women. It's not a story I've ever really shared except for to a few. In 2015, I took a pregnancy test on the 3rd of July because I was late, which wasn't always abnormal. And I honestly didn't think anything about it, and I figured it would be negative. So you can imagine my surprise when I saw a positive. And I will tell you that I panicked. And I was scared because, again, always prepared. And the questions raced. Could we afford 3 children? We just bought a vehicle that really only holds 2. I have so much going on with work. Can I reasonably take time off? Looking back, those seem like very trivial things, but it's what went through my head. It took me a couple of days, which felt like months, of being on an emotional roller coaster. But after 5 more positive tests and the complete support of my husband, I finally was able to relax, told my parents and my sister and brother, and began to get excited. Maybe I'll even do one of those big reveals that everybody does, because that really wasn't a thing when our son and daughter were born. Then a mere 6 days after we found out, something happened that never happened before. I started to bleed. We called my in-laws, who we hadn't even had a chance to tell yet. It was our plan to have them over for dinner and surprise them with the news that weekend. So instead, we had to tell them over the phone that we were pregnant, but we needed them to come to the house to watch our kiddos so we could go to the hospital because we might be losing it. We waited in a room for the doctors and nurses who were all very kind, but the room was cold and sterile, much like I felt. Was this my fault for freaking out at the beginning? After an ultrasound to show that yes, we were still indeed pregnant, but there wasn't much we could do but wait. Wait for the blood test and the next week to determine what our future would hold. Then it was time to go home. We got home after midnight, feeling helpless. And I wasn't sure how to feel, and I was placed back on that roller coaster. I was barely 6 weeks along, if that. And the hardest part is, do you tell people? What if it makes them uncomfortable? Do you share something you barely had? Should you be upset when you weren't sure you were ready for it in the beginning? I wanted to let my parents know, but they had just left for vacation. Do I really call them? So instead, I got up the next morning and I went to work. No one knew. We had tickets to a baseball game that night for all of us, so we went. No one knew. I didn't look any different to the people I saw that day, but inside it was painful. And I was just a woman losing her pregnancy, and no one ever really knew. Funny how that works. This woman's work. I hear that song much differently now. Losing someone is never easy, and it changes your perspective many times over. But we keep moving forward. I love that phrase, keep moving forward. It's not mine, it's actually Walt Disney's. And like in every movie, there are highs and there are lows. And the music we play during those moments allows us to feel it, creating those small wonders we'll remember forever. We get to build strength and courage from the hard parts, and we get to laugh and smile from the good ones. I hope you find small wonders wherever you go, and you embrace your soundtrack.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome back to the stage, Ms. Amanda Crose.
Thank you, Danville. So before we listen to a few more incredible stories tonight, I would love to take this moment to acknowledge those who have helped make this night possible. First and foremost, thank you, CARLE, for our incredible show tonight. As you all know, CARLE provides world-class healthcare right here to the people of Illinois. And they have a beautiful facility, I'm not sure you could miss it, over on Gilbert Street. And this beautiful set behind me that you all wish was in your living room, yeah, it's from Carpet Weavers. They make so many That's What She Said events gorgeous. And how many of you who have used some of these tonight? That tissue sponsor, Clan and Marketing, thank you, thank you, thank you. They come in handy. There are many local businesses who are supporting us here tonight. Many of them are listed in your program. Be sure you check them out. I want to thank all of them for believing in what this event will make possible in Danville. And if somehow you haven't heard yet, we're throwing an after party immediately following this show. Yeah. Danville knows how to party. Upstairs, the mezzanine level in the Porsche Club. I just want to set the stage for you all. DJ, catering by the local, those fabulous cupcakes by Kayla's Chic Streets, and a gorgeous photo booth to help us capture these memories. Do not miss it. And we are so lucky to support a local nonprofit at each one of our That's What She Said shows. A portion of our ticket proceeds tonight goes directly to support the domestic violence and transitional shelter programs at Cross Point. Yeah. These programs are a vital asset to the citizens of Danville and Vermilion County. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And they're incredible human beings to boot. And special thank you to Jason, Crystal, my new BFF, Cameron, and the entire crew. This night wouldn't be possible without you. And thank you to the definition of precision, integrity, and enthusiasm, Kevin McGuire. The number of hours I've spent on the phone with that man, like, this would not be possible without him. And some of you knew tonight exactly what you were walking into, and some of you are still trying to figure it out. And some of you are going to immediately find me at the after party. Yes, girl. Yeah, come get involved, come find me. And though you have seen and heard a lot from me over the last couple of months, I have certainly not done this work alone. Nor was this whole That's What She Said thing my idea. I just said yes. The She Said project and That's What She Said shows are literally taking the world by storm. I may have gained us a new city just during intermission, y'all. That's not a joke, that's real. Yeah. And I would like to introduce to you the incredible woman responsible for leading this expansion, our director, and the national director of the She Said project, Jenette Jurczyk.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Amanda. Thank you, Danville. Thank you, that's my husband. He has been to a lot of these. That's What She Said started as a one-night storytelling event 10 years ago in the flagship community of Champaign-Urbana. by some really incredible women. I had the honor of meeting them in 2015 and joining the team, and I've been directing the live shows ever since. And we are expanding in cities like Danville, but also we've been in Bloomington-Normal for a few years. We're in Peoria. We're launching in Columbia, Missouri in 2 weeks. We're launching in Indianapolis later this year, St. Clair County, Charlotte, North Carolina, Decatur in 2024, and I think we found a new one at intermission?
Charleston,
Illinois. We're gonna talk. Yeah. We're gonna talk. But the She Said Project has grown to become much more than a one-night event. It's a community of women supporting women through the power of storytelling. And if you want more stories, if you like what you heard tonight, you can follow along at the She Said Project podcast, where we get to revisit some of the women who've been on the stage and hear the story behind the story. We get to empower teen girls in some of our communities through our program, That's What Teens Say. And to celebrate our first decade, we launched the She Said Press and recently released our first published collection of women's stories from the stage to the page. So join us, follow along, celebrate the women right here in your community for being exactly who they already are. I thank you all for coming out tonight. We've got a few more wonderful stories to share. Amanda, you have been a dream to work with. Thank you to the Fisher. Danville, this is awesome. Yes. Let's do this. Please welcome back your 2023 That's What She Said speakers.
I do my head toss, check my nails. Baby, how you feeling? Head toss, check my nails. I do my head toss, check my nails. Baby, how you feeling? Head toss, check my nails. Baby, how you feeling? Head toss, check my nails. Baby, how you feeling? And we gon' make you head toss, check my nails. Baby, how you feeling? Baby, how you feeling?
I am my own worst enemy. I don't say that loosely or in jest. The things I say to myself, I wouldn't dare say to any of you. In fact, I probably wouldn't say them to my worst enemy. My internal dialogue ranges from criticizing my appearance, you look disgusting in that sweater, to my intellect, you're dumb as hell. And at worst, my existence, you should hang yourself. For some reason, it's always hang. It floats through my mind the same way you might acknowledge that it's raining. I don't need a crisis call. I don't have any plans to harm myself, but these are thoughts that float through my head on a regular basis. The funny thing is that these internal thoughts remain largely unchanged by the outside world. What others think of me for most of my life hasn't really impacted how I feel about myself. What's also funny is that alongside these thoughts are also really high hopes and beliefs in myself. The notion seems contradictory, and it's one I've been exploring through this process. How does the woman who spends her life empowering others lack self-empowerment? How can I simultaneously want to change the world, but also lack the energy to get out of bed some days? I honestly believe that I can be the president of the United States. But also, not today. I don't really know where the imposter syndrome started. I thought maybe it started as an adult, but throughout this process, I realized it started before that. You see, I was a gifted child. And I'm not just saying that. I was in a program for motivated, academically talented students. The METS program. Thank you. So I spent my formative years with the same group of students from 3rd grade all the way through high school. And they were the doctor's kids, the on the lake kids, the kids who lived in neighborhoods I had never visited. My entire childhood, I never had another black female in my class. There was always one black male, but never more than one. So I think maybe this is where I learned that while I was exceptional, I was also not. That I also started equating titles with money and power and started to see myself apart from them, existing with them, but not really being included. I can hang out with the doctor's kids. I can go to their beautiful houses if our car will make it across Lake Vermilion. I can talk the talk. I can even walk the walk. But I'm not one of you. Jump anyway. I use that phrase, which comes from a short motivational book. Shout out Jason Reynolds. The book was called For Everyone, and I used that phrase in a speech last year. I talked about the feeling of not belonging, of not being qualified. I talked about opportunities I was scared to take, I didn't feel qualified to take, but I jumped anyway. I talked about when those leaps paid off, but what I didn't talk about was when they didn't. Like the job interview I had that was for my dream job at the time. I was dressed to impress. I had done the positive self-talk. I had listened to Drake Started From the Bottom and Eminem's Lose Yourself. I was in my zone. But I went in before a panel interview of people and I felt like a little kid at the big kids table. I stammered. I apologized. I bombed. I didn't get that job. And it wasn't because of my lack of knowledge or experience. It was me. I was in my own way. I had psyched myself out even as I thought I was hyping myself up. Jumping anyway in spite of these internal struggles is courageous, but at some point, we have to address the anyway. Because jumping anyway is like jumping with a backpack full of bricks. You can still do it, but you're not gonna get as high. And with my backpack full of bricks, I've gone from being a battered baby mama in Danville to a cum laude graduate of DePaul University. Thank you. Leading the way for my 3 beautiful daughters. I have impacted lives. I've made systemic changes. In 2022, I was chosen as Central Illinois Business Magazine's 40 Under 40 Woman of the Year. But when I received the call that I had won, the first thoughts I had were, who do I know on that panel? Somebody I know must have tipped the scales, right? Wrong. I was named Woman of the Year because I earned it. From running for office to increase voter education and turnout in Vermilion County, to helping build the community gun violence reduction blueprint for the city of Champaign, to now representing my city as a federal employee, providing support to some of the most marginalized communities, and I've taken a whole lot of hell in the process. But I earned that award. So what would happen if I put down the bricks? It isn't an easy process. It's painful. I started going to therapy. Yes, I have therapy. My friends and family are excellent sounding boards. Prayers and meditation can help ease the daily weight. But to truly unpack a lifetime's worth of insecurities, I had to turn to the experts. It's still an everyday struggle navigating my inner voice through my current reality, but it isn't an act, and I'm damn sure not an imposter. And I can finally say I'm starting to believe the hype about me.
When I was 10 years old, I wrote an essay in school that said, "When I grow up, I want to be a doctor, but I'm afraid of blood." 10-year-old Hannah thought tackling a fear like that was a bridge too far to ever cross. As time went on, the idea that I was just a weak girl, not likely to take on a challenge, only grew in my mind. I never saw myself as talented, not good at speaking, not athletic, not smart at math like my brother. Even though I got A's in those subjects in school, the narrative in my mind at the time was that I was definitely not good at science and math like boys are. So when eventually I marched off to college, I decided to study anything that wasn't those things. I started with an education major. The reason being, the only professional women I can remember seeing growing up were teachers. Even my mom's midwife was a man. However, I quickly changed my major when I took a political science course that captivated me. Science, but no hard science or math. No chemistry labs, no calculus. Count me in. It did happen to highlight something I did see as special about me: my propensity to argue, disagree with established rules, and go against the flow. Oh yeah, political science was a perfect fit. So I graduated and started a master's, and amidst a series of absolutely devastating and life-changing events, including the death of my dad, I dropped out. Quitting my master's felt like a big failure. But amidst all the death and sadness that descended on my life during that time, I realized something. Failure is not the worst thing that can happen. And from that moment on, everything changed. So longing to connect with my father's memory, I abandoned every other path and decided to pursue business instead, like he had. So I got the idea to start a coffee shop, only I had no money. So I worked 3 minimum wage jobs and went to every bank in town and finally convinced one to give me a small business loan, and I marched forward with my plans and opened a coffee shop and roastery. A few years later, I sold the coffee shop, and it somehow felt like a huge failure. But also like that wasn't the worst thing that could happen. One day, my husband Drew and I, when we had been married 5 years but had never thought to discuss having children, found out we were pregnant. The first thing I did was open the phone book, because this was back in the old days, to search for a home birth midwife, because I was from Washington State, the state in the US with the highest home birth rate, and also, relatedly, the best maternity care statistics in the country. This was where my mom and my extended family members had had babies at home with midwives. And there was no midwife in the phone book. For primarily political reasons, in Illinois, home birth midwives only operated underground. In that moment, all my interests coalesced, and I found my cause: helping families get the evidence-based health care they desire and deserve, helping myself and other women achieve physiologic birth at home with a midwife, arguing with politicians. I went to work lobbying for the cause, and eventually I apprenticed and became a home birth midwife myself. Now, the way that certified professional midwives are trained is an apprentice model. We're trained in the field on the job, and it didn't require any advanced science or advanced math. The bachelor degree I already have was an adequate starting point. So I spent years studying during my kids' nap times and attending births while they slept at night and got my certification. But there was still one problem. Certified professional midwives are not licensed in Illinois. I regularly thought back to that first birth I had attended in my training, where there was, trigger warning, so much blood. We walked in the door and the baby had come so fast we didn't get there in time, and there was a pool of blood, and it was my job to clean it up, and it was trial by fire. Childbirth often involved blood, of course. Could I handle it? That question didn't go away quickly, but came up over and over throughout my years of training. But I realized walking out of there, that first birth, that first night, where I cleaned up blood, that I probably could do anything I put my mind to. So the years went on and the problem persisted. CPMs were not licensed in the state, and the chance of it ever happening seemed slim, and I was starting to give up hope. So when one day I heard that CARLE was opening a school of medicine at the U of I, it felt like a significant moment, and it felt like, as had happened many times over the years, something aligned. And I decided it was now or never. And how sad it would be if it were never. So at 36 years old, I marched off to finally take the prerequisites for medical school. At the local community college to hopefully eventually take my shot. What's a dream anyway if you don't try to follow it? I thought maybe I'll fail, but maybe I won't. It helped that my best friend, who is also my husband, believed in me wholeheartedly and encouraged me to jump. This is the same man who once took a 2-month leave from his job when I said, "Let's go live in Haiti for the winter," and proceeded to homeschool our children and potty train our terrorist toddler in a village in Haiti while I caught babies at a local birth center there. So with that critical support, I enrolled in those basic science and advanced math classes that I had avoided for so long, that I had told myself I wasn't good enough to take. The first weeks of that initial chemistry class felt impossible. Nothing was coming easily. So one day, while hanging out at the coffee shop that I co-own here in Danville with my brother Sam, the one who's good at math, I saw a kid from my chemistry class. Only this wasn't any college kid. This was a high school kid taking college classes, exactly 20 years my junior. And I realized I felt less intimidated by him than I did those 19, 20-year-olds who had it all together. So I marched over and used my clout as an older person and the owner of the coffee shop that he was sitting in to convince him to study with me, study chemistry, and of course it worked. We became a very unlikely pair of friends, this 16-year-old high school kid and 36-year-old middle-aged woman, as he so rudely called me. And we traveled together on this pre-med path and encouraged one another along the way. Wow. I finished my prerequisites and I started studying for the MCAT, widely regarded as one of the most difficult tests ever written. During the pandemic, with 4 children at home being homeschooled, I studied for the MCAT. While I stayed out all night working as a midwife, helping families stay at home and avoid the hospital during a global pandemic, I studied for the MCAT. And I finished a calculus course and studied for the MCAT, and I cooked breakfast, lunch, and dinner for special diets every day for my kids and studied for the MCAT. And then one day, in mid-2020, I took the MCAT. And I did really well, by the way. And a couple hours later, I got called to a birth, and I stayed out nearly all night. And the next morning, I cooked breakfast for my kids. I realized that day, after a nap, I didn't want to be a doctor. I had already done whatever it was I had set out to do. I proved to myself I could do hard things. And I loved the clinical practice I already had. The pandemic convinced me how essential it was that women had the option for care at home, if that was what they desired. But we still had that one pesky problem. Certified professional midwives were not licensed in Illinois, as they were in other states. Should I leave? The pandemic had also made it obvious staying in this community that my family is embedded in and loves was a higher priority to me than other goals. So I decided I had to go to work. Almost exactly a year later, I watched as the bill I served as legislative liaison for the Illinois Council of Certified Professional Midwives passed both houses. I got to be in the room when Governor Pritzker signed the historic piece of legislation that women before me had worked on year after year for over 40 years. I got to see it move across the finish line, a step toward more autonomy in healthcare for women. So I failed to go to medical school, but I learned so much. I love science and math, maybe not so much math. And I learned it's never too late. Empowered by those two things, I found the most rigorous scientific training program where I could explore the science of maternal health and nutrition, which I had fallen in love with throughout the process. And I'm so proud to say that in about 6 weeks, I will graduate with a master's in molecular and cellular biology at UIUC. A program that I promise required all the hard science and math. How women are treated during the childbearing year is a big deal with big consequences. And there is so much more work to do. If I wouldn't have failed, I wouldn't be here doing this important work. It was a great failure.
You see this drip, huh? All right. Live your life, Jenette. Live your life. Those are some of the last words that I can remember my mother saying before she was unable to speak again. Even during her funeral, she still was able to let me know that's what she wanted me to do because the pastor said the same thing. My question is, how can you live life when you have spent the majority of your life taking care of others? So let's take a journey back to my childhood. Growing up, I was a normal kid just like everyone else in my eye. I was spoiled. Now remember that because I'm never going to admit that again. My mom and my grandmother gave me everything that I wanted and then some, and all I had to worry about was going to school, playing, and keeping myself entertained. Life was fun then. But at the age of 13, life as a carefree kid stopped. The same year, not only was my mother diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, she had a stroke that paralyzed her on her left side. At that time, I wasn't aware that life as I knew it would never be the same. There was no more life of being carefree. Suddenly, I had to grow up and be there for my mom. I had responsibilities of making sure she was okay before I could do anything. I was raised to go with the flow because life happens. You just pick up the pieces and keep it moving. At that age, I did not realize that I was putting me on a back burner. Now, don't get me wrong. My mother encouraged me to continue to enjoy life and do the things that I loved. But regardless of anything that I did, her well-being and making sure that she was okay was always in the back of my mind. As time moved forward, her condition got worse. She needed to have around-the-clock care, and I had to make the difficult decision of putting her into a nursing home. I thought that would relieve some of the burden off of my shoulders, but it did not. I constantly worried and was afraid that one day I would receive that phone call that we always dread. I began to start traveling more and trying different things. I even started my DJ career. Hint, hint, y'all need a DJ? You're the best, girl. I landed a job as an over-the-road truck driver. It didn't take long before I did receive a call that my mother was back in the hospital. So again, I had to go back home and make sure she was okay. She wasn't. So I quit my job and found a job in town, and 4 weeks in, I did receive that call. My mother is gone, and you are never prepared for that. My best friend, my role model, and the person that gave me life was gone, and life stopped for me on that day. During her funeral, the pastor stopped his sermon, and he completely zoned in on me. The words that came out of his mouth were so familiar. Live your life. Your mother wants you to live your life. I hear you, ma'am. But right now, who am I? Where do I begin? For 4 years after she passed, I was in robot mode. Every DJ gig that was available, I took it. And home was just where I slept, nothing more. Home was a constant reminder that I was stuck. And if I kept working, I would not have to think about anything else. And being a DJ helped with that. Everything was a party, and I didn't realize how much I was hurting. No one else knew it either because I kept a smile on my face and I kept it moving. I even kept this hurt away from my awesome partner that I was getting close to. That didn't last long, though. When the pandemic started, I had to sit down. And when you sit down, your thoughts make a loud entrance. I had to face the reality that it was time to figure out some things. It was time to live my life and figure out who I am exactly. I had to change my way of thinking and get out of the routine that I had grown so comfortable being in. I had to think about my interests and what gave me pure joy. I had to figure out what it was that makes me the person that I wanted to be. And most importantly, I had to wake up because it was time to live. First thing, I had to get rid of the things that were making me depressed, and moving was at the top of my list. I told my partner that I was getting rid of everything, but I think she thought I was joking. Oh, but I was not. I got a dumpster, and I threw away everything. I might have even gotten a little carried away because I probably shouldn't have threw away that carpet cleaner. Now that the clutter was gone, it was time to move. So I packed up. I had left and moved with my partner to a smaller town, and that was definitely a test. I went from having something to do to nothing. No nightlife at all. And if you're a DJ, that's one of the worst things that you can do. I told myself that this would be one of the perfect times to concentrate on getting myself back to what I loved and missed about myself and figure out what it was that I wanted to do. Next on my list was getting myself back in shape. I needed to get my first love back, basketball. Know your limitations, people. I have not played basketball for real since my mother passed 8 years ago, and I am pressing 40. These knees are not the same. Nothing is the same. Especially these kids. And anybody under the age of 20, they're kids to me. So I stepped on the court, and y'all, they called me old. And on top of that, they were talking so much junk. And look, I don't care how tore up my body is. Oh, we playing. And I'm talking mess right along with you. But guess what? I lost. But best believe I made them work though, okay? That year I also joined the women's league. Now remember, I'm realizing that playing is not my strong suit anymore, but I did notice that I enjoyed coaching, and that goes hand in hand with teaching. So I took that and applied it towards my work that I currently do, and that's working with kids. I already teach DJing to younger kids, and in order for a lot of them to get comfortable with you, playing basketball is a great segue. By being on the court and showing the kids something different, I did not realize that I was becoming a role model, and I was beginning to live my life on my terms. Over the years, I had made it a point to become a role model, just like the adults have been in my life. My mother, my biggest role model, had been teaching me what life is about. Since I have gotten older, I'm starting to realize that even though she was sick, she still managed to live and set an example by doing that. I'm learning that living is not just about existing. It's about figuring out what it is that you enjoy and applying it towards everything that you do. I'm still learning about myself, but at least I stepped out on that ledge and I didn't look back. I know that my methods aren't for everyone, but I hope this message was loud and clear. It's okay to take your time and grieve. It's okay to not know your next steps when it's time to come out of your shell. as long as you take them. So step out on faith and live your life.
I like to joke that I was born so poor, I had to sew the bootstraps on before I could pull myself up by them. I was born in Danville and grew up in Vermilion County. My parents got a divorce when I was 7, and my dad moved to St. Louis when I was 9. Yes, that did give me what some people might call daddy issues, but what I like to call trust, self-worth, and self-esteem issues. I was bullied in grade school and junior high like a lot of other kids. I had Coke bottle glasses. I've never been a thin girl by any means. And I had a gap so big in my front teeth you could fit a couch through it, according to my classmates. I experienced my first sexual assault when I was 14. My next when I was 16. The man that assaulted me was 33 years old. I later had to change his oil when I worked at a quick change oil place in town. The first time he came in, I hid in the pit, told my coworker, and had a panic attack about it. That second time, I may or may not have left his oil filter a little loose, but that's not the point. I was 19 when I had my first baby, and I was 20 when my sister came home from her first heroin overdose. 6 weeks later, I moved into a house with crooked floors and shag carpet, but no heroin. I worked a full-time job, a part-time job, and I sang 4 to 6 nights a week for about 3 years to make the money I needed. I was diagnosed with depression and then later bipolar disorder in my early 20s. Given some medication, told therapy's probably not what you need, and turned into a very numb robot for about 5 years of my life. By the way, everyone can benefit from therapy. That doctor gave me a Band-Aid for a gut shot. I was married and divorced before I was 31. I had met someone that checked all of the boxes that society labels strong man. And it turns out I also checked the boxes that society labels strong man. Yeah. And after years of trying to make myself fit into a box I was never made for, making myself smaller and easier to consume for the male ego, I realized I could be myself and only have half the laundry of a married woman. I say all this to try to give an idea of how most of my life has been spent jumping from traumatic event to traumatic event, and therefore how little time I ever had to really process any of that. Hell, I didn't even know what trauma was until COVID. I had always heard if things are hard, grab them bootstraps. That's all it takes. Then one summer night, while everything was shut down, someone I thought I could trust drank way too much. He started getting more and more aggressive. And I remembered a time when I was a teenage girl, and a grown man who was drunk told me he was gonna take my horse and tie her to his truck and drag her down the road. And I remember how after he said that, my friend's mom physically removed him from that campground. And when she did that, I was like, that's a bad bitch. But then she looked at me and she said, when they're drunk, just do what they say. It will be easier when you just do what they want. You will have a better chance of staying alive. That night, with everything shut down and everyone shut into their houses, I did everything he wanted. And I still ended up broken and bruised. I was compliant. I was smiling. And nothing went the way it was supposed to. After that night, I tried pretending everything was fine, like I had my entire life. I thought if I just push through this, I'll get over it and everything will go back to how it was. But this time was different. The Bonnie I was had gone. She was too damaged. She had been through her years of hell and retreated rightfully so. I was completely empty, a walking void. And really describing this feeling to you does not do it justice. It is overwhelming despair without the release of crying. I took my first grippy sock vacation in August of that year. I made sure my kids would be with their dad. I didn't have any gigs lined up at the guys at the shop where I worked. They would figure that out. I went into the hospital with the intention of not just getting my head above water, but gaining tools to manage my mental health better. I left with my face barely breaking the surface and a whole lot of Led Zeppelin knowledge. I read their autobiography while I was in there. Not a lot to do. That's a long way of saying I felt like I haven't been given many tools. I had been given medication and a referral to see a psychiatrist, but unfortunately, none were accepting patients at that time. Now, I've been poor my entire life. Poor white trash, as my friend's mother once called me. But you know what poor people are good at? Grabbing those bootstraps and giving them a good tug. Even if people better off than us don't think that's what we're doing. I eventually found a doctor in Champaign, which was difficult to facilitate since I worked a full-time job in Danville. But then my insurance didn't want to cover the medication I just spent 6 months trying to get. So I did the thing they say not to do. I started doing my own research. Bipolar disorder is something I will live with my entire life. I can either keep doing this exhausting and failing dance, or I can grab them bootstraps and pull myself to the next step. The thing about this mental illness is that, yes, you will cycle between moods, but they're not like regular moods. They are super extreme, all-consuming moods. And as you grow, triggers get attached to these moods. So I have this knowledge and the will to be a functioning adult, kinda. So I have to start learning my triggers and then battling my own brain response. While my brain is screaming, "Yes, burn it all down, you are beyond reproach." The first time I took on one of these triggers, I was getting ready for church. I had a terrible self-image. I really hated my body. And so every time I would get dressed to try and look nice, my brain would tell me how gross I looked. Why was I even trying? I'd never be pretty. I'm gross, poor, fat, white trash. But at that point in my life, 2.5 years ago, I was 20% body fat. Elder Bierman had recently shut down, so I had some nice clothes. I decided this would be the first trigger to tackle. So one Sunday I tell my family, stay out of my room. I go into my room, put on an outfit, exhale. It was hard not to cry, not to scream and throw my clothes, but I breathed my way through it. And I've never felt that way again getting dressed. But I also stopped caring about what looked cool, because me and Stevie Nicks think I look real cool, okay? But I had a lot of little battles like that over the course of the last 2.5 years. I still have them. They are just far fewer and more in between. But after I felt that emptiness, that nothingness, there was one thing I knew for sure. If I could help make sure that no one ever had to feel like that again, I'd do it. So I try every day to encourage women around me. Sometimes they think I'm weird. Like the girl at my office that I invited to lunch on the second day, and then she told everybody in the office I was a weirdo. Joke's on her, I am. And stuff like that made me want to stop being kind to people. It really made me want to just not deal with society at all. But I just had to learn boundaries. I had to learn to really not expect myself from other people and to just be kind with no expectation. I think a lot of people are mean because it's easier. But I'm poor. I'm not afraid of a challenge. During this time of inner work in my life, I found my circle of friends changing. I have an amazing group of friends that genuinely love and support each other. People I can lean on. People that go Pokemon Go hunting with me. Oh, the dopamine, get me a Pikachu. But eventually, I got tired of going around and farting rainbows and puking butterflies and watching other people just be mean for sport, mean for no reason or just because they're ignorant. So I stopped letting that little stuff slide. I started addressing the people using slurs in front of me. I didn't keep quiet when people were speaking out of ignorance. I started saying the quiet part out loud. I'm not mean about it, and I'll walk away rather than have a pointless debate. Because I know no one listens to an emotional woman. I just say the things that, to me, a decent human being would say. I'm a singer in a cover band. We do a Casey Musgrave song I love, and the chorus goes, makes lots of noise, kiss lots of boys, or kiss lots of girls, if that's what you're into. I have a few stories about this song, but the one that sticks with me the most was in Attica, Indiana. After our set, a woman came and hugged me crying, thanking us for doing that song there and telling me about her daughter's journey. And so when the opportunity to help organize the first Pride event in Vermilion County kind of landed in my lap, I knew I wanted to do it as best I could. If I could help create a safe place for people, I wanted to be all in. Our budget was $1,000, and we had 3 weeks. Let me grab them bootstraps. The day of Pride, it rained, which meant no bubble man. It was our hottest item. One of the author's skid plates fell off her car on her drive down from Chicago. One of our 2 drag queens canceled that morning. And I, in the middle of the event, had to come back here to watch my son play bass and then drive up to Rossville. But the community was more excited that the event existed than hearing what else we had planned for them. I got to spend an amazing day with amazing people, celebrating who we are, and I'll do it again this year. Just bigger, better, and gayer.
These are the moments
just gotta keep going. And I gotta be strong and just keep pushing on, 'cause it's always gonna be another mountain. I'm always gonna wanna make it move. It's always gonna be an uphill battle. Sometimes I'm gonna have to lose. Ain't about how fast I get there. Ain't about what's waiting on the other side. It's the climb. There's always gonna be another mountain. I'm always gonna wanna make it move. It's always gonna be an uphill battle. But sometimes I'm gonna